Is The Mandalorian a space western, or is it in fact more of a samurai film? I'm Jonathan Hetterly. This is Psych Cinema. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Kohlberg's stages of moral development. I'm going to also be highlighting positive psychology and having a moral code. And finally, I'm going to wrap up looking at this idea of death anxiety and why some people don't fear death. But before we get started, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel so you'll get notifications whenever we drop new content. Also, minor spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about the first 3 episodes of The Mandalorian, although it's already out there on social media and the web, so I don't know why you would be watching this if you don't know what's transpired in the first 3 episodes of The Mandalorian. Now, I'm enjoying The Mandalorian. I've done a review, and I think that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. This show is hitting all the beats that I love about Star Wars. It feels familiar, it feels worn in, gritty, and dirty, but it also is hitting on some themes that I personally find really rewarding in my pop culture consumption. I've actually written about this in a book on Star Wars psychology, edited by Travis Langley, and I wrote an article on Star Wars, samurai, and underdogs. And that's essentially what we're seeing here with The Mandalorian, is we're seeing how he is an underdog and what compels him to act the way that he does. Well, let's first look at Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development. And Kohlberg developed these 3 stages that help us to understand the morality or values of why people choose to do what they do. His 6 stages are grouped into 3 different levels, each with 2 stages. So level 1 is pre-conventional morality. Pre-conventional morality focuses on self-interest before the person learns moral conventions. We see this in the original trilogy with Han Solo and with Lando Calrissian, where they're always asking, what's in this for me? So in The Mandalorian, it starts out as he's just a basic bounty hunter, that he's in it for the money and he doesn't ask questions about who his target is, what they've done. It's simply a job for him. So he's very detached from that. But then as the series goes on, we see that there is more to The Mandalorian, or Mando as he's sometimes referenced. Good thing he's not Lando, because then he'd be Lando the Mando. As he moves forward, we start to see that he has a higher level of morality and values than simply he's in it for his own self-interest. So level 2 is conventional morality. Conventional morality is characterized by an acceptance of society's conventions concerning right and wrong. So what we start to see is when he finds his major target, which is the baby Yoda or the child, he starts to have second thoughts about handing over someone that's young, even though baby Yoda is 50 years old, of somebody that essentially he believes to be helpless without anybody advocating or looking out for him, handing him over to the Empire, which we know that they have nefarious means or plans for the baby. And so you start to see him question, is this simply just another bounty? Is this simply another job? We also see how the baby Yoda has had an impact on the Mandalorian, that he sometimes starts to feel a personal connection. So then in Kohlberg's stages of moral development, he gets the 3rd level, which is post-conventional morality. And post-conventional morality is marked by a realization that the individual's own moral reasoning may take precedence over society's view. Now with The Mandalorian, it maybe isn't so much with society's view and morality, it's that he starts to wrestle with his own. In his job as a bounty hunter, he's not supposed to ask any questions. He starts asking questions.
Asking all them questions. Asking all them questions.
He starts to second guess whether or not he can live with himself by handing over the baby Yoda to the Empire. So we even see very early on in the first 3 episodes how the Mandalorian has come to his own stages of moral development and growth simply by this latest assignment of handing over the baby Yoda to the Empire. If we're looking at The Mandalorian, he to me represents more about a samurai or a Ronin samurai, a masterless warrior, than he does a gunslinger that we oftentimes equate Star Wars to being a space western, because he is showing that he has a very clear moral code. And that starts to kind of flesh out as we start to see that he's a part of a larger community of outcast Mandalorians that are living in exile underground that can only come out one at a time. And that's really where I want to focus on this concept of positive psychology and a moral code. Now, positive psychology is a relatively new way of looking at psychology, not just from a pathological perspective, not just what's wrong. We learn that people tend to have higher life satisfaction and build resiliency the more they have a clear moral code, clear values, things that they believe in that oftentimes direct their behaviors versus just to reduce or eliminate psychological stressors. And so the Mandalorian, like samurais, have a very specific code. We learn this as oftentimes he's talking with his fellow Mandalorians and they use the catchphrase, "This is the way," that somehow that there's this overarching guiding principles that inform the behaviors and decisions that they have. And so it's really important for people to have a moral code and to have values in order to live a fulfilling and meaningful life for themselves. We also see this with acceptance and commitment therapy, or otherwise known as ACT, where it challenges people to not necessarily act upon their emotions and feelings so much as to channel their decisions based on values, right? Value reasoning, moral reasoning over emotional reasoning. And so the more that we learn about the Mandalorian, that he has this code of right and wrong, good or bad, that is very specific to the Mandalorians, even to the point when he makes the decision to rescue the baby Yoda and he's surrounded by other bounty hunters because now he has a bounty on him. The rest of the community comes to rescue and save him, even at their own peril. And he warns them by doing so, they're going to have to move the tribe. They're going to have to relocate because now they're in danger. And another Mandalorian basically says, this is the way. It's part of their moral code that they look out for each other. And that was very similar to samurai, that they had this rigid code for honor and for warriors and courage. They were not just lawless or aimless mercenaries. And I think that's one of the ways how the Mandalorian continues the Star Wars legacy of looking at parallels in samurai films, specifically the films of Akira Kurosawa, and looking at the Ronin, the masterless warrior that's looking for purpose in his life after his purpose, which was to serve his master, is no longer there. And so you see the Mandalorian at the end of the third episode put his own life at great risk to save the baby. And again, that really shows a higher level of morality where it's not just about self-interest, because he's basically put himself in a suicide mission. In the similar way that the Rebel Alliance in the episode 4, A New Hope, does when they're about to attack the Death Star. And that's really where we look into this idea of death anxiety, that a lot of times people's decisions are based upon their own perceived threat. You even see this in modern Japanese culture, a culture that's much more spiritual, and they view death as just a natural extension of life. And so it's really not about preserving your life at all costs. It's about living a life of dignity and honor and having a death of dignity and honor. For the samurai warrior, they had a code called the Bushido, which was really about how to live and die by honor. And so the Mandalorian really is looking at a situation. He's having really an existential crisis of what can he live with. He got a great reward or bounty for delivering the child, but he's finding he can't live with himself knowing that they're going to do something horrific to the baby, and he profited off of it. So that would really be a dishonorable life for him, a life of shame and guilt, rather than he puts his own life at risk to save the baby, even if it means an honorable death. That's something that he can live with. So The Mandalorian really is an extension of samurai psychology, of the underdogs, and why people continue to fight even when the odds are against them. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy this show so much, even though I have to say, again, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. But I'm interested in to hear your thoughts about The Mandalorian. Does it really register more as a Western or something more of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon? Or do you see some of these parallels that we've seen throughout the Star Wars universe about warriors and Jedis and having an honor code that really informs The Mandalorian, even though he's still an enigma? We still don't really know an awful lot about him. Leave your comments below on your view of the samurai or Mandalorian psychology. You're also welcome to leave recommendations of films or television shows that you would like for me to dissect here on Psych Cinema as well. That's going to do it for this episode of Psych Cinema. Thanks for watching. I'm Jonathan Hetterly. Until next time, I'll see you at the movies.